Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of what my Nepal, I used to work in Nepal, what my Nepal colleagues used to joke about when they described the GI tract. I don't think that joke. I'll leave that to them. But basically the GI tract is really a tube running from the mouth to the anus. And what's interesting is the inside of it is technically outside the body. And so you actually for that reason, I don't like people to open up the tube in the cadaver. Like the temptation is to do it to, for example, see the really cool innards of the small intestine that are designed to increase surface area for food absorption. But if you open it up, you're releasing stuff from outside the body into the inside of the cadaver, and you can get infection and mold. Right? So it's a little bit weird thing, but basically that whole inside of the tube, the lumen of the GI tract is outside the body. The other interesting thing about it is, sorry to get graphic, it takes more than 50 hours typically to go from eating food to defecating. And so that means when we die, there's always stuff somewhere in the GI tract. Fun times. Okay. A few other little interesting little side angles on this tube. There's a lot of accessory organs that aid in digestion. So of course it starts in the head with salivary glands. And, you probably all know that. Maybe you don't. That saliva is moistening food to help make it easier to masticate and make it easier to pass it down through the esophagus to the stomach. But you could do an interesting experiment. Like, aren't the worst crackers ever invented saltines? Okay. But you could argue they're pretty good. Like, they don't have any flavor, so whatever you put on them, like, takes over. So maybe they're good in that sense. But they definitely aren't sweet, right? But do this the next time. Take a saltine. Next time you have one, and instead of like immediately inhaling it, spend a minute chewing it, and it will start to taste sweet. So actually, chemical digestion starts in the mouth, not in the stomach. Some people think actually some fat digestion actually starts in the mouth too. Some lipases made in the saliva. Saliva also has really cool antibacterial properties. It's a pretty neat substance. You could also get salivary stones. I know y'all know kidney stones and gallstones, all of which are incredibly painful. You can have salivary stones too. Okay. The pancreas is another accessory organ. Pancreas is cool. It's a dual organ, so it has an endocrine function, which means it's dumping some chemicals into the blood, principally insulin, which we use to regulate blood levels in the blood and uptake into cells. And it's an exocrine organ, which means it dumps chemicals outside the body, people. It's dumping chemicals into the inner part of the duodenum that is outside the body, okay? So it's an exocrine organ too. Pretty neat. Gallbladder, this is kind of cool. The liver, apparently there's over 500 described functions for the liver. It is such a cool organ. It can regenerate, like you can abuse it. And it'll, I'll leave that to your imagination about how you could use your liver. That might have happened with some of you at the Halloween party that I just It might happen at the karaoke party. Okay, yeah, let's hope no one ends up with Saturday Night Palsy. Thursday Night Palsy next week. Go here. Okay, liver. Yeah, it can regenerate. Like, how cool is that? The brain can't regenerate, as far as we know. Okay, stop. I mean, you can undergo neuroplasticity, but not in the way the liver can. That's kind of neat, right? 500 functions at least. One of them is to make bile, and I told you why. We can't easily absorb fats unless they're emulsified, and that's what bile is. And we store it and concentrate it in the gallbladder. And that's why, though, you can take the gallbladder out. I have seen in cadavers gallstones as big as like a diameter wide marble. And people will tell you that gallstones are unbelievably painful. So like take it out, man. Take the gallbladder out. It's not the end of the world. The liver still makes bile. You just have to be a little bit careful with fatty foods, but basically you're fine, right? That's an accessory organ too of digestion. Basically, autonomic nervous system is speeding up what the GI tract is doing. I'm sorry, parasympathetic branch, and sympathetic nervous system is slowing it down. Okay? Right. Okay, so first view, again, we don't see the intestines, we see this greater omentum, which is probably, I'm thinking, the only peritoneal membrane I'm going to ask you about. It's hanging off of the greater curvature of the stomach. Another thing you'll see is this membrane hanging off the liver, which just attaches the liver to the front of the abdominal wall. So I want you to know this is called the falciform ligament. Here it is. And then it's going to continue. It's going to be like continuous with or connected to this other ligament I want you to know. And this is called the round ligament of the liver, or ligamentum teres, so that we don't confuse it with the round ligament of the uterus. That is the remnant of the umbilical vein. So you're gonna learn about and see two different fetal remnants of the circulatory system. I just talked about one earlier, right? Harry Potter's ligamentum arteriosum. This is the second. Blood coming back to the fetus from the mother is going through that umbilical vein, and you can see it in bodies. Like every body, you can see the remnants of it. Very cool. Sometimes you'll see it going all the way to the umbilicus still in a cadaver. Okay? Okay. Behind the stomach is the pancreas, so we say, excuse me, the pancreas is retroperitoneal. Okay? And this is a better representation of that. Oftentimes you look in there and you don't see the pancreas. And the head of the pancreas has that relationship with the first part of the small intestine, right? Duodenum. Okay, anyways, this is being recorded. Sucks. You guys are going to send that to the head of your car. Okay, so here's the head of the pancreas. Here's the duodenum. And you can see how there are these two ducts feeding into the second part of the duodenum. The pancreatic duct, right? This is part of the exocrine organ. These are digestive enzymes. So there's some chemical digestion starting in the mouth. There's more taking place in the stomach, and then it ends up in the small intestine, mostly in the duodenum. Almost none in the large intestine, people. So even though the large intestine is large because it's big diameter, not a lot of absorption taking place there. Okay, mostly water. Almost all chemical absorptions take place in the small intestine, which is why little tangent, because I bet this impacts some of us. Celiac disease, right? In that disease, which is an autoimmune disease, your own immune system starts to attack the small intestine, degrade the wall, and then guess what happens? You don't absorb food as much as well. Okay, really interesting disease. Like, actually, you really should. I'm hoping you're going to get some celiac disease stuff in your path, because I try and teach this to my med students, because one of the major causes of joint pain is not typical arthritis, it's celiac disease. The last thing you would expect. You're thinking small intestine, problems with gluten, with pasta, with beer. You're not thinking joint pain. Yeah? Joint pain. So something should all be on your radar, because you're obviously going to be working with that as PT people. Okay, anyway, so there's this relationship of the head of the pancreas with the duodenum, and then you can see the bile duct coming down here, joining forces with the pancreatic duct. So two kind of things down to the duodenum. And the tail of the pancreas makes its way over here to the spleen. Thinking about Steve Jobs had Apple. He died of liver and pancreatic cancer. He had pancreatic cancer, and then it metastasized. Guess where? The liver. Now you see why, right? They're right next to each other. Common blood supply. So oftentimes, if you have cancer there, it's going to end up, in the duodenum, the pancreas, in the liver, that whole area, right? Shared blood supply, etc. Okay, so, you could have a whole course just on the function of the liver, super cool structure. It's storing sugar, it's making bile, it's detoxifying stuff. For that reason, it has a dual blood supply that I'm going to talk about, okay, which is really neat. Okay, because we want to detoxify the food that we just digested before we send it up to the brain. Okay, you're traipsing around in the weekend in the foothills of the Sierra, and you're really excited to find this mushroom that you're going to add to the salad. But man, there's a lot of mushrooms that could be good in the salad, and other ones that could kill you in an hour, and you don't want that in your salad. And if some of it ends up in your salad, you kind of want the liver to try and detoxify it first. So actually, we're going to send that recently digested food first to the liver. So it's a cool dual blood supply. Right? There's a hepatic artery sending oxygen to the liver, but there's a pulmonary vein sending recently digested food to the liver, so we can detoxify it, store sugar before we send it to the rest of the body. Really, really cool, really hip system. Okay. All right. So here's that falciform ligament that's connecting the liver to the front of the abdominal wall, and then here's this little doohickey. If you want to know how to spell it. Doohickey. I don't know. Is that how you spell doohickey? No? Is that how you spell doohickey? Okay, cool. I spelled it right. Okay, that's a doohickey. Otherwise known as the round ligament of the liver. And that's the remnant of the umbilical vein. Nah, I'm not going to do this. It's getting obnoxious. I wanted to yell doohickey. Okay, so here's the stomach, people. Draw the stomach. To remind you, there's a lesser omentum hanging off the stomach running to the liver. So it would be like right here. Okay, that's a bad color. White on white. Okay, that's the lesser omentum. And if we kind of remove that, you will then find what we call the portal triad. Really important set of three structures. So I want you to know about this. Okay, this is macroscopic. You can see it. This is what, if you put your finger under here, you're going through the foramen Winslow. You can clamp that off so that you don't bleed out if you're doing an operation. Okay. So what are the three structures going into the liver? So on the right, the bile duct. This isn't really going into the liver, but it looks like. Then we got the dual blood supply. Okay, so I'll do this like this. So we got a hepatic artery. This is bringing oxygen-rich blood to the cells of the liver. Like any organ in the human body needs oxygen. So okay, but then it's a dual blood supply, like I just talked about. This is called the hepatic portal vein, or just the portal vein. This is the guy that's bringing your recently digested meal to the liver, right? This is the liver right here. These three things are the portal triad. Okay? So I want us to know that. Pretty important. Okay. And actually really important clinically. So again, let's just say, you're drinking too much, you end up with liver disease, cirrhosis of the liver, and many different kinds of disease. Anyways, one thing that happens is then the blood going into a diseased liver ends up having a hard time getting into the liver. Okay? It encounters more resistance when there's a diseased liver, so it starts to back up. So instead of that nutrient-rich blood going this way in the liver, it starts to go backwards because it can't get into the liver. And then what it does is it goes out to the periphery, and it starts to dilate peripheral veins in three main places, like the anus, the esophagus, and near the umbilicus. So if you get dilated veins in the anus, those are called internal hemorrhoids. If you get dilated veins in the esophagus, you start coughing up blood, and it's a medical emergency. So that's called portal hypertension. Really common clinical condition where like this blood in the hepatic portal vein, it's having trouble getting into the liver and starts to reverse flow, right? Interesting. Super common clinical condition. Okay, this is the visceral surface of the liver. We don't have any livers to take out, so you're not going to see this, but so this is that portal triad. There's three things going into the liver, and there's the gallbladder feeding into the bile ducts. This is your bile ducts. Okay. We talked about this. I'm gonna move on. Okay. So I think this is really cool. And so there's all these specializations inside the small intestine designed to increase surface area, and the reason is this is where we're absorbing food. We're not really to any major extent in the large intestine. So there's three systems to increase surface area. The first thing is there are these ridges that you can see with the naked eye. These are called plica circularis. Plica circularis. Here they are. You add a ridge, it's not smooth, obviously, stating the obvious, more surface area. Second, they're little finger-like villi sticking up off the surface of the epithelium lining the small intestine. You can actually see these. You guys all know about a colonoscopy, but I bet no one here has had one. You're too young, but eventually you should get one. Because, like, you know, I have a really close friend who's about to die because he never did it, and then he found out he had stage 4 colon cancer. Sucks. Pretty treatable if you catch it early, you know what I mean? So, but the thing is, so what they do is, and this would be a chance to just review large intestine. They run a tube. It's a pretty cool tool. It's an amazing tool. Run a tube up through the large intestine with a video scope. It's got tools where, like, if you see a polyp, you can take the polyp and you can put it in a container and take it out and biopsy it and find out if that polyp precancerous or not. It's amazing. But okay, so here's my point. Okay, large intestine. Okay, cecum, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, anus. So obviously this is where the tube goes in. Okay, don't try this at home. Okay, it's crazy, man. They'll like give you a video of it sometimes. Like, what am I supposed to do with this video? Play it at the karaoke. Okay. Anyways, so oftentimes it's at the end of the GI tract where we often have polyps, like sigmoid colon or rectum, but you can have them anywhere. Okay. But they could. You could go all the way down here, and then you could go. Remember, here's the small intestine here. And the end, right, the first part's the duodenum, the second part's the jejunum, the third part's the ileum. So there's a little, right, connection between the small intestine and the large intestine. So you could take that colonoscopy scope and actually bring it into the end of the small intestine. If you do it, you'll see the little villi lining the surface. And to my mind, they look like, if any of you have been, snorkeling, little sea anemone tentacles, they're cool. Okay, and those are the things that get killed off in celiac disease and the microvilli. Okay, so that's the second layer of structures that increase surface area, the villi. This is a villi right here. Okay? But then the villi, which you can see with the naked eye, meaning it's composed of hundreds of cells. The little cells lining each vilum actually have hair-like extensions at their top, almost like a mohawk, and those are called microvilli. Those actually really get destroyed in celiac disease. That's the third level of adaptation to increased surface area. The microvilli are, as the name suggests, microscopic, right? So like you'd have to do a biopsy if you want to find out someone's got celiac disease, degradation of the microvilli. You know what I mean? Okay. But you could Google it another time. Check out like video of the inside of the small intestine, and you'll see how these villi look kind of like sea anemone tentacles. It's cool. Okay, so all that's just designed to increase surface area, right, for food absorption. Pretty cool. Now, if you look inside the large intestine, you don't have plica circularis, you don't have villi, you don't have microvilli, because we're not absorbing food to any large extent. That is not to say, though, that the large intestine isn't important. There's like this new whole exploding hot field of science on the biome of the large intestine, the microbiome of the large intestine. There's also an exploding research into the biome of the vagina, the biome of the skin, the biome of the eye, the surface of the eye. Now there's new work into the biome of the brain and how that might break down and lead to neurodegenerative diseases. But I would say most research has been done into the gut biome. There are, according to some estimates, 10 times as many organisms living inside your large intestine as the number of cells in your body. I mean, that is a triplet. If you have like 1 trillion cells in your body, which is probably what you have, there's like upwards of 10 trillion organisms hanging out, partying, it's like karaoke party every day in your large intestine, covering all phyla, parasites, viruses, bacteria, all kinds of stuff. It's cool. And it's thought that basically, mostly, likely beneficial. And so one of the problems like taking too many antibiotics, for example, is you kill them off and you can completely reconfigure your biome. I really want to go more into this, but it's like, oh man, it's too bad. Yeah, there's so many. Can't do one thing. Like vaginal birth C-section. Think about it. C-section, you're coming out through skin. Vaginal birth, you're coming out through the vagina. In those two situations, the baby coming out is exposed to two different biomes. In one, the biome of the vagina, and the other, the biome of the skin. And it has effects on the fetus. Anyways, and people are now thinking about we're probably putting too much soap and chemicals on our skin. Like our skin is designed to protect us, man, not to have us put constant soap on it. So I'm not saying never take a shower. It's like a lot of research going into that, which is interesting. Cool stuff. Okay, so anyways, inside the large intestine looks different from the small. That's my point. It took me a long time to get to the point. Yeah. There's 3 ways, though, other than the fact that the large intestine has a big diameter, there's 3 ways you can tell it apart from the small intestine. We'll look for this in the cadaver, okay? They're these funny little, almost like finger-like floppy extensions. They're called epiploic appendices, okay? Little fatty appendages. As far as I know, their only function is like fat storage, and like a little tangent too. This is kind of new thinking. That's cool about how science works. I think the old view was if you look at someone and they're obese, it's probably bad news. Increased chance of diabetes, all this kind of stuff. The new view is not necessarily. The more problematic kind of fat is the visceral fat that we find inside the abdomen. So like you open up the body and you just see fat everywhere, ton on the large intestine. That's actually a worse sign. So like the real worst situation is someone who looks thin on the outside, but you open up a ton of visceral fat. They're probably much more in an unhealthy situation than someone who just looks from the outside obese. Do you know what I mean? Anyways, kind of interesting. So as far as I know, these little epiploic appendices are just little fat storage sites. That's one way you can tell large intestine from small intestine. Another way is, it's kind of interesting, the outer smooth muscle, right? The smooth muscle in the large intestine moves food down it, call that peristalsis mostly. For whatever reason, in the large intestine, the outer layer coalesces into 3 bands. So here's a band right here. And these bands are called tinea coli. And then it's thought that when those bands like contract, over time it forms these little pouches in the large intestine, and these little pouches are called house drum. Okay. So you don't see pouches like that. Where are you? Whoa. Oh man, I was so excited. I thought, God, I made it to the end. No, I didn't get close. Somehow I just fast forwarded to the end. So if you look at the small intestine, see, there are no house drum. There are no fatty appendages.
Oh, yeah.
And there are no tinea coli. So 3 ways easily to visually tell large intestine from small intestine. Let me draw for you the portal system. So remember, portal triad, 3 structures: bile duct, hepatic artery, hepatic portal vein, dual blood supply. Let's just think about that portal system. What does it really consist of? I like to think of it as forming a chair. Okay, so this is the hepatic portal vein going into the liver. So this is the blood supply bringing nutrient-rich blood to the liver. This leg of the chair is the superior mesenteric vein. This leg of the chair is the inferior mesenteric vein. This leg of the chair is coming from the spleen. So this is the splenic vein. And that's the hepatic portal system. So let's look at it on a PowerPoint. So superior mesenteric vein, inferior mesenteric vein, splenic vein. So now you got the legs of the chair, the seat of the chair. And then the back of the chair is the hepatic portal vein. Okay. Right. And that's the portal system. Okay. Nutrient-rich blood to the liver. Okay. If you remove the GI tract, you can see some important what are called posterior abdominal wall structures. So, like, I would say for us, of interest is like the abdominal aorta bifurcating into 2 common iliacs. That's really important clinical site. I had a friend who died because he had an abdominal aortic aneurysm. It's really common in people right here. Any branch point in arteries is a common place where over time, that at the branch point, the arteries can lose their structural integrity and it starts to balloon out. He apparently just had a massive aortic aneurysm and it popped one day. It's like 3 years ago, just dead. So we can look for that. It's also really cool to see the kidneys and the ureter draining the kidneys, so we can look for that. That's neat to see. It is all posterior abdominal stuff. A lot of these structures are retroperitoneal, meaning they're behind the peritoneal membranes. Inferior vena cava, we can look for. Retroperitoneal. That's going to return blood to the right atrium also. Lumbar plexus, gonadal vessels, so these are things that we can look for. So like, for example, here's the inferior vena cava, here's the abdominal aorta, here's the bifurcation into 2 common iliacs. We can look at some posterior abdominal wall muscles like quadratus lumborum, which helps us laterally flex. Psoas and iliacus that form iliopsoas, the major flexor at the hip. We could explore the diaphragm if we remove the GI tract. Body 6 is great for that. You can see like the holes in the diaphragm that allow, like, here's a hole for the inferior vena cava, here's a hole for the esophagus, here's a hole for the aorta. You can see that kind of stuff in the diaphragm much more easily if you remove the GI tract. Okay? And then you can see this in body 6. One thing I want us to do. Okay, so let me just kind of set this up. The abdominal contents develop from 3 different systems, if you will. So there's what we call a foregut, a midgut, and a hindgut. Okay, so for example, liver, stomach, stuff like that, that's the foregut. Small intestine, most of it. A semicolon. God, this is horrible. Transverse colon. That's all the midgut. And then lastly, we can do a different color. This is a horrible drawing. D semicolon, sigmoid colon, rectum. That's hindgut. Here, let me do foregut again in a different color. I'll show you why I'm doing this. So foregut is stuff like liver, stomach, pancreas. Okay, that's the foregut. So guess what? Foregut, midgut, hindgut, they each have their own blood supply. So we need to identify that. Okay? And you can see it really easily on this cartoon representation. So the blood supply to the foregut is this structure. It's not easy to see actually. It's right here. Celiac trunk. The blood supply to the midgut is called the superior mesenteric trunk, right here. And the blood supply to the hindgut is called the inferior mesenteric trunk, and it's right here. No, actually, but this is good. This is so foregut, midgut, hindgut. Let me do that again. Okay, so foregut is coming from the celiac trunk. Midgut is coming from the superior mesenteric artery, and hindgut is coming from the inferior mesenteric artery. So it's a separate blood supply to each of the 3 regions of the abdomen. And there's different organs in each region. Right. We'll get back to that. Okay, we'll get back to that. So one of the structures that you're going to see behind the GI tract, retroperitoneal, is the kidneys. And the kidneys are privileged organs. They also, just like the brain, are receiving about 20% of the blood at any moment in time, and they're covered in fat. And they're going to filter blood to make urine, which is cool. Right. Okay, and they're going to get blood from a branch of the abdominal aorta, which is called the renal artery. After they filter the blood, and the filtrate's called urine, we're going to run that urine to the bladder for temporary storage by the ureter, which is a smooth muscle-lined tube, and so we can look for that. The place where all the stuff is going in and out of the kidney, just like the place where all the stuff is going in and out of the lungs, is called the hilum. You can survive on one kidney. So, I know I have a friend whose sister donated to him one of her kidneys because he had kidney disease. She's fine. He's fine now. That's kind of interesting. I think I'm going to remove this though. This is really physiology and yeah. So I'm going to remove this. I don't think you guys know this. Happy to talk to you about kidney physiology if you're interested. It's super cool. Like this inner part of the kidney is a mammalian adaptation, which allows us to concentrate urine. When you concentrate urine, what that means is you're not peeing out much water. What it means to concentrate urine is you're saving water. Like if you live in a desert environment, you don't want to pee out too much water. You're going to die quicker. The only reason we can do that is this mammalian adaptation. The inner part of the kidney allows us to do that. It's highly saline and it sucks out water through osmotic processes. Super cool. But I'm taking this out. Okay? All right, taking this out. Don't have to present on this. Okay. So there is a little organ connected to the kidney called the adrenal gland, which is linked to our sympathetic nervous system and part of the fight or flight response, which is cool. And the kidney output is the ureter, which is this muscular tube that's going to bring urine to the bladder for temporary storage. Okay. A lot of different arteries supplying the ureter because it's so long. Okay. I'm going to take taking that out. Okay. A little interesting asymmetry I want you to look for. Okay. So the blood supply to the gonads, right? The organs that make sex cells, whether it's eggs or sperm. The blood supply is kind of interesting in males and females. So the arteries to the ovaries and the testicles both come off the abdominal aorta. There's no asymmetry there. In male, there's the testicular arteries, in female, the ovarian arteries. Okay, but in both male and female, the veins are kind of weird. I think we learned this previously, but I want you to go back and look at it. So on the right side, the right gonadal vein goes right into the inferior vena cava, which is kind of what you would expect. So I'll do it in green. Okay. So there's the right gonadal vein going into the inferior vena cava. But on the left side, the gonadal vein goes into the renal vein and finally into the inferior vena cava. So it has a longer path. Let me just do it for a second time. Show you the blood supply. By the way, this is where I ended up last year. I'm gonna get maybe 5 more slides through, so you can skip forward through the first part of the Zoom. Okay. Okay. So just to remind you a second time, blood supply to the foregut is coming off the celiac trunk. There it is. Blood supply to the midgut is coming off the superior mesenteric trunk. There it is. Blood supply to the hindgut is coming off the inferior mesenteric trunk. There it is. So it's like this. Celiac trunk to the foregut. Superior mesenteric trunk. It's usually like a centimeter away from it, so that's why I'm doing it right next to it. To the midgut. And way down here, inferior mesenteric trunk. To the hindgut. Surgically, you can take advantage of this if you're mucking about in the sigmoid colon. Like, let's say you have colon cancer, the sigmoid colon is a really common place for colon cancer. You're going to have to be thinking about the branches of the inferior mesenteric trunk. You can ignore celiac trunk. You can ignore superior mesenteric trunk. Okay. All right. Remember from last week, before Thanksgiving, I talked about how there's two locations for sympathetic ganglia. So one location is next to the vertebra on the left and right, so that's the sympathetic chain running from neck to the pelvis. Easiest to see behind the lungs. You're probably going to see this for the first time today. So sympathetic chain ganglia. But the second place we have sympathetic ganglia is sitting on the abdominal aorta, right around the blood vessels going to the foregut, midgut, hindgut. So like here, right around the celiac trunk is a celiac ganglia. Here, right around superior mesenteric trunk is a superior mesenteric ganglia. And lastly, down here, right around inferior mesenteric trunk is an inferior mesenteric ganglia. So we've got these pre-vertebral autonomic ganglia sitting right on top of the abdominal aorta. Right? So kind of to tie back to last week. We talked about that last week. Right. Another thing I want you to look for is this system gives off some nerves that go into the pelvis, and you can see this on a number of cadavers. It's cool to see. So where the abdominal aorta bifurcates into two common iliacs, you're going to see this nerve plexus coalescing right at that bifurcation area. Let me do it in blue, right here. And that's called the superior hypogastric plexus. There it is. It's mostly sympathetic. It's going to send two nerves down into the pelvis. So just think of this as like sympathetic nerves going down into the pelvis. These are called hypogastric nerves. And almost done. So now these sympathetic fibers and these hypogastric nerves, they're going to meet up with the second part of the parasympathetic nervous system. Recall, people, parasympathetic nervous system had two parts. A cranial part, remember, 3 + 7 = 10, and 9. Okay, that's the head part of the parasympathetic nervous system. But then S2 to S4 is the bottom part of the parasympathetic nervous system. So these S2 to S4 parasympathetic nerve fibers, they're going to join forces with those hypogastric nerves. And they're going to form a plexus down here that's mixed with the hypogastric plexus, the inferior hypogastric plexus. And that's basically the autonomic plexus that does stuff in the pelvis. Like you want to urinate or you want to retain urine. You don't want to pee. You want to contract the uterus. You want to help the rectum contract, defecate. And that's the plexus. Okay? All right. Let me end there, but draw that. Okay, so, you got to go to that zooming. Okay? So, here's the abdominal aorta. I'll just do a few things. Okay, so celiac trunk, superior mesenteric trunk, inferior mesenteric trunk. This is going to the foregut, midgut, hindgut. Okay. Surrounding that are an autonomic plexus of celiac ganglion, superior mesenteric ganglion, inferior mesenteric ganglion. Okay. Then there's like these autonomic fibers coalescing right here, right where the abdominal aorta is bifurcating into two common iliacs. Okay. So that's the superior hypogastric plexus. Can you read my writing? It's pretty good. Okay. Then this guy is going to form two nerves that goes down into the pelvis. These are called hypogastric nerves. Let me take my time to spell that for you. Okay. So now we're down in the pelvis, and pelvic splanchnics from S2 to S4, right? The bottom part of the parasympathetic nervous system, S2 to S4. these guys are going to join forces, and so now we got this plexus. This is called the inferior hypogastric plexus. And there you have it. And that's the guy that's going to do stuff mostly like autonomically inside the pelvis. Like change what the bladder's doing, what the uterus is doing. Okay? Anyone going to the lab right now? Okay.